Okay, dear ladies and gentlemen, in my extension, I will talk to you, firstly, why hackers are the right agent, and this would be a direct contradiction to most of what the previous speaker told us. And secondly, and more importantly, I will talk to you about why it is so important for the Western world to get the real information and how it allows the Western world to support these communities in the oppressed regimes. But first of all, let's start with the rebuttal. Now, what the previous speaker told us is that, well, we need a gradual change in these oppressive regimes. You know, we cannot just do something massive. We believe that exactly this is what our plan provides. You know, because we do not just, you know, intervene there as we tended to like to do. But right now, we are causing this gradual, slow change from the inside of the country and as well from the outside, as I will show to you from my substantive. So we believe that this is fine. Also, you know, that Google lies, that not all the information in the internet is not correct. Google is not our agent here, Google is not our hackers. We believe that, you know, by supporting, you know, those correct people, we will assure that the correct information will be spread. And I will talk to you about it more in my example about the agent. No, thank you. What will happen, you know, if the oppressive regimes know that the Western societies act like that? We believe that it's the same scenario as with the spies, you know. Every country has spies in other countries, but, you know, no one really cares, and they all do that, and this is fine. We believe that this stands, and this is not a problem. Now, let's start with the direct clash, no thank you, between, you know, what the previous speaker told us about, you know, hacker communities, how they're anarchists, and, you know, how we cannot control the consequences. Mr. Speaker, why do we believe that exactly the hackers are the correct agent under this plan? We believe that if we choose such agent, we will not suffer the human costs as we would in other scenarios. We believe that if we would have real journalists, you know, real people protesting there and doing stuff and trying to spread the news, they will be very easily and suddenly killed by the government, you know, and they will not act anymore. We believe that the hackers are very hard to trace, therefore they are the correct agent for this information spread. We believe that this is fine. Now, the only problem which the opposition sees with them is that they are not accountable enough accordingly to them. We believe that this is false. We believe that exactly through our plan, we make them accountable. We believe that we can choose the hackers, you know, we can choose the people which we want to support. Secondly, we can constantly monitor what they are doing. And we believe that through this, you know, firstly, through this we assure that, you know, the correct people are being supported technically and financially and otherwise. And secondly, we believe that we also, you know, choose the people who have a personal interest to help their country, to do well for their country. And these people have no personal interest, you know, to do harm. Exactly, we choose the patriots of that country. Before I start with my second substantive, please go.
If Western democracies are dumb enough to not understand and not find out who supports Julian Assange, which lives in Western democracies, how come they will be better to find it in oppressive regimes?
Actually, on the contrary, a few accounts of Julian Assange were already frozen. The Western world is not dumb enough. It you know, does stuff to stop them, and I do not really think that this is at all relevant at this point. Let's move to my second substantive argument. Mr. Speaker, why it is so important that the Western world would get the real information? We have to understand that the oppressive regimes are not called oppressive without a reason. Obviously, and everyone in this room agrees that there are human rights violations in those countries. We believe that since crimes against humanity is happening there, it is necessary not only for the population in the country itself to know the real information, but also for the outside world. Because we just, you know it very... the information which we know is very unclear. We do not know the exact crimes which is being done. And through this plan, we will be able to get the exact data. We will be able to get images which will be shocking and which will show the real situation in that country. And we believe that for us, for the Western liberalities, as already the second speaker for the first proposition told us, we have this moral duty, you know, to monitor what is happening in those countries. Because if we do that, if we monitor and if we see what is actually happening in these countries, we can start, you know, we can start certain actions. We do not mean that we will intervene. We do believe that this is a bad tool. We believe that we can implement other sanctions. We believe that we can have economical sanctions. We believe that we can, you know, have pressure instruments in these countries. We believe that our own people, once they see what is really happening in this country, they will pressure the Western governments to start doing these sanctions and to support these people in those oppressed regimes. Don't you agree with me?
Could you please show like an exact factual mechanism of making these hackers accountable, of tracking their actions, of making sure that they do exactly what they want?
Okay, thank you. Well, unfortunately, I'm a lawyer, not a, an IT specialist, so maybe I will not tell you the exact actions which you should implement. But the state surveillance services are at most professional, and we believe that they can track anything down, and they do that constantly. They find all the hackers who get to the FTP servers, etc. They do that constantly. It's fine. So we believe that when we implement this plan, we will not only, have change happening from the inside, as the first proposition showed you, but we will have change happening from the outside, with the help of the outside world, as our extension showed you, Mr. Speaker. And we believe that also, what this brings, if the Western world knows what's really happening, is that the regime itself will be less likely to commit these crimes against humanity, because it will know very exactly that, the Western world is surveilling them, and they will be less likely to, start these crimes, because they want to uphold a good relationship with the Western world, because they have economical relations. They know that the Western world can do sanctions for them. So we believe that the change will not happen from the inside, but it will also happen from the outside. So, Mr. Speaker, due to all the reasons I talked to you about today, please propose.
Okay, thank you much for your speech, and now I'd like to give floor to the only thing that hasn't spoken yet in this debate. Douglas, the floor is yours. Here.
Oh, sorry. It's strong.
Technical.
Ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to show in my constructive, that even if we concede that providing financing for hackers somehow leads to the regime change, even if we concede that it's effective, what I'm going to show is that exactly what their plan is doing is first undermining the communities, and they're undermining their abilities to act, even if they do some good things. The second thing, I'm going to talk about how it undermines the legitimacy of any kind of information those kind of groups are providing. But first of all, two pieces of rebuttal. So first thing, what Monica told to you is that hacker is a right agent, and she gave you two reasons. First, because it's hard to trace. Second, because it has personal interest to help the country. We say a single reason that somebody is hard to trace does not refute the harms that the opposition raised. That for the fact that they are not accountable, that they can create an action that is harmful to other countries. That does not. That single criteria does not become a criteria for funding something. The second thing that she said is that they have personal interest to help the country. I'd like to raise one point. Hacker communities are not the opposition movements. I mean, they are not. Why does the government believe that always when I'm hacking, I'm not hacking for my personal interest, but I want something to be good to my country? We say what I'm going to provide in my talking about the culture of hacking is that they kind of perceive it as themselves as the free agents that exactly hack for pleasure because it's exactly complicated to hack something. This is not necessarily where the interest is aligned with the state's interest. That's why it's not necessarily the information that is revealed is necessarily either going to lead to the regime change, or it's going to be beneficial to the regime change because it may not necessarily represent the right information. No. The second thing that Monica has brought to you is that we need this change from outside, because all of a sudden the outside world will understand how bad things are in North Korea. The first thing is the outside world already knows how things are bad there, like particularly in North Korea. We know it's undemocratic, we know it's probably it's doing lots of atrocities against its people. That's not sufficient to raise the political capital in the Western regimes, in the Western countries, to basically address those problems. And what they forget is that hacking is not an investigative journalist. It's not like you're going to provide more vivid images about what's happening in those countries. So we don't think that you're going to create a political capital that is going to influence the decision of the Western people to basically do something about that particular regime. So we don't think that's going to be effective to endorse that change from outside, what they're trying to promote. Okay, moving to my constructor material, and that's our extension. So first thing is how the support from the West undermines the hacking communities in the first place. The first thing I wanted to note is that the government has conceded that we're not only going to support them, we're going to say to them what kind of information is to be hacked or to be revealed, and we're going to force that. Okay. And then the second government added, they are going to hold them accountable, which means a direct control, right? Why is that bad? Because first I want to talk about the hacker culture and what is a hacker. We say, as already the first opposition kind of said, it's a kind of anarchist, right? But I'm exactly the hacker, or I can respectfully call myself a hacker, but I'm totally free to do things that I like. Like we say, many of the reasons why actually talented IT people engage in hacking, it's not that they want to foster the regime change, it's because they find it as fun to crack the code of something that nobody else cracked, right? It's something as a kind of they see as an achievement, then they themselves decide what to achieve in the first place. And an important element of that is that exactly they perceive themselves as free to decide what kind of things to do in the first place. They have their own goals, they're not trying to achieve the regime change. So, okay, how does that change? So basically, what the government is going to happen, they're going to finance the communities, but probably what we see, and physically we see the communities are probably a platform where the hackers are gathering, right? So it's not going to be the hacker's decision to accept that financing. It's going to be some kind of platform of community that is accepting that kind of financing and that kind of accountability. So when we say the hacking communities are substituted of free hackers that gather on a certain platform and they reveal the information they have hacked, right? So exactly, if the hackers see that due to the financing of the West, is now the West dictating what kind of information is to be hacked, or what kind of, what kind of job they basically had to do, that undermines their understanding, or they can no longer call themselves as respectful hackers that act freely because of the, self-interest, or because of this kind of sport to break the code just to break the code, right? And this is going to be an incentive to leave that platform in the first place, because you can no longer be called a hacker, right, if you belong to that particular platform. And why do we think that is bad? Because exactly, if there are any kind of benefits that those platforms are providing, like some kind of information revealed to the wider public, that accidentally happens also to be beneficial for the regime change, that is going to decrease. Because the success of those communities depends on the talent that they actually have inside them. It depends on the IT specialists that perform hacking activities and that are talent, because you need talent to basically hack something, right? So, because as they are going to perceive those platforms as not the right place for them to be, basically those platforms are going to deteriorate in quality and the amount of information that is revealed, simply because there's going to be nobody who's performing those kind of actions, yes.
We say that we are okay with those hackers bypassing the censor for their personal reasons. What we say is that even if they do it like that, it is still beneficial to the community because more information spreads.
Yes, that's true, but what I'm saying is that when they know that the community's actions are going to be associated with what is dictated with the West, they will no longer want to belong to that particular community, and that's why the content of that community and the amount of hackers performing in that community is going to decrease. So that's the first thing. My second point is how it undermines the legitimacy of the information hackers reveal. Because even if we concede that some part of the information can foster the regime change and help to the country to get rid of oppression regimes, how does that undermining that kind of information? Because we see the people who currently get that information, for example, I'm from the opposition movement, right? Or other people of the wider public, I will no longer receive that information as something objective, but as something that is dictated by the West. I will no longer necessarily see it as something that is beneficial for my country if I would act in a way that information dictates to me. I would see it as something that is beneficial to the West, and this is what West dictates to me. So I will have more incentives to refuse that information in the first place. The second point is that it becomes very easy, it becomes very easy for the oppressive regimes to use that rhetoric of Western intervention. When they're going to, so one way to tackle hackers is basically to limit their activities. But the second way is basically to undermine their credibility, is by saying exactly, look at those hackers, they're serving the interests of the West, they're only revealing the information that is important to the West, but not necessarily is important to our country. That is how, by using this rhetoric, the regimes are becoming more powerful and more able to undermine any kind of information that from the hackers that is used among them, and that's why the regime change is no longer going to be fostered. For those reasons, we will.
Thank you, Aris, for your speech. We've done two last speeches in this debate, and I'd like to give the floor to the government. We're getting into the floor on the government side again.
Wait, can you...
Yes, can you move it along?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll start with a short refutation of what the Arvidas have said, and my summary is going to be extended on 2 points. First of all, how accountability is going to be reached for the hackers, and how control is going to be reached, and the second of all is going to be how the change is actually going to be achieved, and etc. So first of all, the Arvidas came up and said, and here's this extension, oh, the hackers are going to be lose self-respect, and etc., and so on and so forth, the hackers are free, and blah, blah, blah. We said, who calls who a hacker, the whole bunch of things he had said. We said that people have their own motives, there is no ethic code of a community saying you're only hacker if you're only doing job entirely onto your own. We say there is no such mechanism is going to tag you as someone who's serving for the West simply because you're difficult to trace for your own community. If you do not go out and say I'm working for the West, nobody is going to find out. And if you follow your personal interest, which is, as Arvidas has said, trying to crack interesting information, interesting and secret information, you already have a motive strong enough to be continuing to be a hacker, ladies and gentlemen. Moreover, that dictation of West, as they call them, it's not telling them what to hack or not to what to hack. It's rather telling them of what not to do with with the support what you're doing. For example, not having a virus in the Iran plan and etc., and not trying to concentrate entirely on trivial figures or something like that. It's rather saying what you shouldn't do. If you want to leak some German porn into China, feel free to do that. We're not banning you. We say just as long as you have some other result which leaks shocking images and etc., we're still fine with you, and there is no dictate, so therefore no respect. No respect for you. You still follow the job that you like and etc. The whole point false. No, thank you. Now, the other point was basically, but the legitimacy is lost. First of all, we once again say the Chinese people, they do not know that we sponsor those Western hackers. They are not. It's not like you're going to have a shocking image of a military beating up, students, and then you put a logo, the community of hackers who have been sponsored by the West. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not going to happen, so the people in the first place are not necessarily going to know. But what is more importantly, even if they're going to know, we see the images you see of what your government is doing wrong, in your, the shocking images as in videos and etc., of torture, or whatever, of rape that are put there, they're so emotional that are considered necessarily so truthful, because, see guys in your country's military uniform and etc. That the fact that the Western is sponsoring this is, just in the second plan. The most important thing is that you see this information that you didn't know existed, and therefore we say the whole legitimacy is going to be still there or not going to be harmed in any way. Thanks. We are moving on to my summary, ladies and gentlemen. The whole accountability point control, blah, blah, blah. We say the whole idea of what they say, that they're going to have these, personal motivations and all those bad stuff happening, are only plausible if we fund or if we support just any random hacker from that particular country. We say then, yes, we do not know what he's going to do or what the results are going to do. We say we are not going to do that because we're not silly. We know our policy is not going to pay off if we take just any random person from that community hacker. We know perfectly well that we, with our capabilities, technical capabilities, our own hackers, our intelligence system, can follow these people in those countries and see whether some hackers are actually working for the benefit of their own country, or whether hackers who are just working for leaking porn into Germany, which is also good, but it's not the point. It's not the point of something that we want to do. Therefore, we can choose whom to pay. And Arvidas has said, okay, they might not be the idealistic, pragmatic ones, and etc. Even though we're fairly positive we can choose the idealistic ones, even if
They are just pragmatic, ladies and gentlemen. It means that they like cracking the information which is difficult, secret to get, which is, in case of oppressive regimes, exactly the information that we want to get. The one which is difficult to get, it is exactly the whole shocking images of what your government is doing bad. So even a hacker is completely pragmatic. We say still motivated by this pragmatism of this difficult information to get. His results of work, no thanks, are going to be beneficial for us because the results are going to be good, ladies and gentlemen. We say the results matter. Shoot.
The problem is that nowadays a hacker uploading German porn on Chinese website can be considered as the first step of cyber war. Why can you guarantee that there will be no cyber war?
Oh, thanks a lot. Okay, Monica brought up this case with spies. We all do that, we all pretend we do not do that, but we just do not simply call a war by saying, we saw some German porn which is linked to China. Ladies and gentlemen, the point still stands. Even if China manages to see that we are doing that, it doesn't have a pretext, a plausible pretext into the international arena to do anything bad. And we say, this is fantastic, we will walking the grey line that they cannot get. So now on, the control. We simply say, we choose the right hackers, we can choose to fund them, they become dependable, we withdraw the funds that we've given them, and then they cannot follow whatever their personal interests they have or whatever their idealistic interests that they have. We can monitor them as absolute, say, with spies, agree on certain codes, blah, 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 the whole technical stuff that I'm not good at, but still, the whole monitoring process can be agreed with those hackers if they want to keep on getting our personal funds and etc. And the whole, motivations. Yeah, so therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we can track these people and we can control these people, and we are going to do that, and it's going to bring us certain benefits, which puts me to the third point of, We're going to my second point of what kind of change do we have. Ladies and gentlemen, the whole idea of change have been very badly tackled. The only thing the artist has said was, prove me that those people are going to be leaking shocking images. I have. We say we choose the right hackers. I say even if they're only pragmatic, they're going to have this secret information leaking, which is always the one that oppressive regimes doesn't want to be leaked. Therefore, we're going to have it there. The people seeing with shocking images and etc. Maybe the hardliners who believe in the regime are not going to change. But we believe lots of our population, those people, are those who do not simply really know what their governments are doing, although don't really assume, for example, in Libya, who are kind of average supporters of a regime, but whose opinions might be easily swayed because of its shocking images, of its shocking information. No, it's not investigative journalism, because investigative journalism is analysis, which is not going to work because people are not necessarily going to read. But the videos on YouTube that are easy to see of your government abusing other people is something that the people are going to be watched. And this is how the change happens from the inside. Why it's also happening from the outside? Well, simply, ladies and gentlemen, I don't see much tackling of the side of our point either. But the point is, even though we all know that China is doing something bad, when we are confronted with the real information by hackers from these countries, all those shocking images and etc., it necessarily creates this emotional appeal in us to actually want to fight against the regime and etc. The huge uproars are always happening there. Then people see some emotional piece, for example, a student being shot in the Tiananmen Square, rather than just knowing that the China is abusing someone, right? So that, ladies and gentlemen, this is how we create a certain uproar in our societies that throughout the model that Monica has said, we can pressure our governments to take more stricter stand towards these oppressive regimes. We say we reach a couple of things here. We can control the hackers, and we will. We have the change from the inside. We have the change from the outside. The mechanism works perfectly. For all these reasons, I make
Thank you, Evgeny, for your speech. And the last speech in this debate, in the semi-final, I would like to give you the floor to be how to close the side of the vision. Hey.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, I will summarize this debate in 3 questions. Will this measure help those groups to fight against the oppressive regimes? Secondly, how the culture of the hacking will change? And third of all, will that information get into the right hands? So let's start from the beginning. Because what we heard from Evgenia is that we can keep that information in secret. We think that no, the evidence showed us that that information was probably be leaked because of the culture the internet has. For example, we tried to keep secret torture in Guantanamo Bay. It still came out. We think that in the area of WikiLeaks, it is very easy for us to let know. And yes, that will bring the very things that Aridus was talking about, in the sense that those groups will be associated with the Western propaganda, and those individuals will be associated with that. They told us that information is needed because those people are brainwashed. We say that if you are brainwashed, you're probably not going to believe that information anyways. Because if you think that there is nothing wrong to your country, firstly, you don't have an incentive to check that opposition side, and even if you are checking that, you still are rejecting that information since you have this deeply rooted belief that the government is doing something right. How you make it even more harmful? You make it even more harmful because you provide the tool for the government to actually point out and say, yes, we were right. They are the ones who are imposing the Western rhetoric on us. They are who are infringing the Western propaganda and so on and so forth. So that will be a tool for the government to use to even further brainwash its own citizens and to even further create this unacceptance of hackers and unacceptance of the information that hackers provide. We say, they told us also, it will be easier for those individuals to communicate. No, we say, they can already communicate. We say it will be easier for the government to track down those individuals, to hunt down those individuals, and to reveal who those individuals are. We don't think it is a very good thing. Now, we told you, on our side, that it will not help the groups to fight against oppressive regimes, because it will create the notion and it will associate those groups with West and perceive them as a tool of West. This is important because, firstly, it will be perceived as a Western agenda, someone who is completing Western goals and someone who is imposing Western propaganda. More than that, if they will no longer be seen as legitimate, they will lose power to change anything at all, because they will lose public support, they will lose credibility, they will lose accountability to that extent. We say that, we say that it will actually create the incentives for those governments to point out and to say that yes, these are the tools of Western propaganda, you should never believe it, you should believe us.
Sure.
Okay, moving to the second argument of what will happen to the culture of hacking. And they told us that hackers are the right agents because they are so damn difficult, no thank you, to track. We say this is not simply true, because hackers also leave footprints on the internet. Those things such as IPs, those things like cookies and so on and so forth, are the things that can be found, are the things that can be tracked down. Moreover than that, if the governments are aware that some things that are happening in the state are associated with hackers, they are more likely to track down internet entirely. For example, in some regions or some communities, we think it is definitely a huge harm there.
Sure.
No. They told us that it will also help us because it will help us to get the real information. We say that it is not like we do not understand what is happening in Iran. We do that. We don't think that a very tiny fact about who have been killed at what particular square will add a lot to our information or to our knowing what is going on in the oppressive regimes. We probably already know that oppressive regimes are not that nice. Anyways, the problem is that we cannot do nothing about it. For example, I don't think that you are suggesting that we will be dealing with China. We will never do that because of the other reasons, because we have to deal with China, because we have to cooperate with it, because we have to negotiate with it, and so on and so forth. We don't see how that information would actually help those individuals. But what will happen on our side, is that we believe that those individuals who right now perceive themselves as being free agents and doing something on their will be pushed into a situation when they are dictated what they should do and what they should be. We see that it is harmful because to those individuals who does not accept that, the only possibility for them is to leave that particular community, because you're founding the community itself, you're not founding a specific hacker. We say that the outcome of that is that the communities will lose hackers, in the sense that those hackers are not able to provide the very benefits you were talking about in this debate. Now moving to my last point of whether that information will get into the good hands before that.
Okay, look, even if we're only finding communities but not individual hackers, since we are basically do not have leaders, rather very, kind of democratical in itself, it is obvious that all the hackers are going to be funded from that community are going to know and agree with an issue, either from their personal interest that it's such a fun job, or from whatever it is.
Okay, so even if that will happen, our harms which were shown of how those individuals were perceived as a Western propaganda tool still stands. You does not defeat it with that point. Okay, moving to my last point of will that information get into the good hands and how? They told us that we can control those hackers, and my question is, how are you going to do that? Are you going to ask them to send you CVs? Are you going to profile them? Are you going to question them what their views are, or so on and so forth? And even if you're going to do that, how do you know that they are not lying to you? You spend like a lot of time explaining how those hackers are anonymous, how can they be secret, and so on and so forth. So how on earth are you going to know what those hackers are going to do in the first place? We say that there are a lot of harms which have been brought from the first opposition, because if we don't know where we give that money, if we don't know what that money can be used for, it creates those harms when information which should not be leaked and which information which is harmful can be leaked. They brought this example of power plant, and we totally support that. We say that all the points we have presented to you, we beg you to oppose.